Hello, good evening. So once again, thank you so much for showing up here to this session. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah. So today we'll be having a session on user experience design process, and we'll be having Samantha, who is a user experience design at Microsoft. Yeah. So Samantha, if you can hear me, you can take off. The floor is yours. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Humphrey. I'm going to share my screen and then maybe we can just jump right into it with the intro and then straight into the presentation. I hope my screen can be seen. Is it visible?
Yeah. Yeah. The screen is visible.
Great, thank you. Okay. Yes, so my name is Samantha, as Humphrey has introduced me. I'm a user experience designer in Microsoft, and I'm really happy to be here and sharing, just some of these processes. I'm seeing some names that I know on the list of attendees, so it's really nice to see every one of you here. Even though I can't see your faces, it's still great to hopefully we'll be able to interact later in the call. So yes, so today I'll just be going through briefly what the UX design process according to how I interpret it. It's not the same for everyone. Sometimes you see different things on different websites. Other people have different definitions of the UX design process. So this is more of the UX design process according to my interpretation and also how we use it at the company as well, and where my past jobs, my past roles. So I'm going to go here. So we'll start with the importance of UX. Just introduce myself, and then going into the UX design process, and then any Q&A at the end. And I would also like to, hopefully there's a short sample of just the UX design exercise that I would like us to go through together based on what we've gone through in the presentation. So hopefully we'll be able to do that as well before the Q&A. So what is UX design? I don't know if I can, is it possible to take maybe like one or two responses just to hear how other people define UX design in itself? I don't know if I would have to allow the mic maybe after. I hope I can be heard. Is it my end or is it the other audios?
Oh, now we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just seeing in the chat. Okay, great. I'm seeing designing the user's experience. That's good. Maybe I can take one more. Just a quick answer of what UX design is. Yeah, the process of designing meaningful experiences for users. That's really great. So, and design, create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. Yeah, these are all really great answers. And the process of empathizing with users, defining problem, and designing the solution concept. Nice. Yeah, these are exactly the things I wanted to kind of open up with. So, according to, just a simple definition is it's a mixture of actually a lot of what is being said already. So user experience design is the process design teams use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. And design is all about the process and methodology. Actually, it's not just about the final outcome or the solution. It's about this iterative process that gets you to design solutions that are relevant for users. And I also don't limit my thinking within a very specific process, which is A lot of times you see on the internet very specific steps, and sometimes it can really limit you to those specific steps. But in the real world, design works in kind of this, it can be very sporadic. So if you limit within those steps, and it can kind of restrict you sometimes. But having a mental process when doing any design project, that's something that you have as a framework, but you're not restricted in every design project to follow. So it's more like a guideline, not rules. I think that's the best way that I define them. And this is a quote by Jared Sinclair that says, "Good design is about the process, not the product," which is very interesting. So even when you go through design interviews, you'll see a lot of hiring managers a lot of times want to see even more than the final UI, because visual design skills can be built, but what they want to see is your thought process and how you think through the different concepts, and how you defend your design decisions, how you've come to certain decisions and things like that. So that's something you always want to be able to highlight in your design work. And these are just some interesting metrics I also found online. 74% of businesses say that user experience is vital for increasing sales. There's also 70% of online still do so because of bad UX. And then 90% of users won't return to a site solely due to bad UX. So these are just some interesting UX related statistics that show the importance of a good user experience to a brand and to a company or a product. So very high level, the design process that we'll go through will be understand. These are kind of how I've simplified them. Online you'll see things like define. There's all these like different names that have already been put, but I've just kind of simplified it in a way that helps me understand and contextualize these different steps. So it's understand, then explore, build, and then finally test. Keeping in mind this is all iterative, so even after test, you'll just go back to understand, explore as you keep building onto the product, just like that. So the first step, as I mentioned, is understanding. And at this point, this is really, you've gotten this thing that maybe the company wants you to do, like building a certain feature. At this point, you want to be able to understand the different user and business problems relevant to the product that they're using, and then also the specific features. What are the current gaps? What are the current, what's working, what's not working? So being able to problems, and then also being able to conduct a UX audit. I think that's very important because, as you know, an audit just means being able to take account of what is actually there. This will it'll help you identify any problem areas, any gaps, to see what's working, what needs to be done to actually get something of this feature relevant to the users. And then also looking at what competitors are also doing, in the same space. You want to be able to see, maybe if you're working on, as you can see on the left, if you have maybe 3 competitors you're looking at, how is their product quality, the pricing, the place? Because at the end of the day, you want this feature to make your product stand out. It's always how you can get people to stick with your product. So you want to be able to, you're always trying to see how other people are doing it and what you can do to be the standout product. Then we have explore. So researching and exploring is a huge part, and I think last week you were able to go through the session for UX research with my colleagues. So I think you were able to talk about all the amazing research methodologies that you can use to take your products to the next level, and just that whole process of UX research. So this is the exploring phase. I think the way I see it is, you want to use this time to fully understand now, like, you're going, through research, through all these different methodologies just to see and understand this problem space so that you can properly define and frame the problem statement. Because without understanding this key problem that you're trying to solve, you're not going to be able to get far with, what exactly you're designing, because you want to understand what your users are thinking, what their day to day is like, and how this feature might fit into their, their context, so that it's actually relevant. You don't want to come with your own assumptions and, design something that's so off base to what they would actually be using. And then at this point, you also want to be able to synthesize those research insights to transform the findings into actionable product insights. So that's a very important part, because there's very there's a lot of difference in what they actually mean. So you want to be able to really look into that and see what is it that would actually what is it that they actually are saying in all these different findings. And this is just to help you really understand how and what you're building, how you're going to build it, who your users are. At this point, also, you're thinking of like the different personas that are coming up in the research, which are the different user groups, so that you're able to actually design relevant products. So this is a very key and one that should take quite some time, because you want to give enough time to research, as well as to synthesize the findings. Depending on the kind of team that you work in, it could either be that you work with a researcher, or the researchers, depending on how many or how big. So for us, we have the research team and we have the design team. So after the research is being done, what we do is actually go through the different findings together and try to analyze them together to see how we can bring out these product insights, instead of just waiting maybe on the researcher to give us recommendations. It's always best to kind of see how you can collaborate with them. And in other cases where you might be the designer, the researcher, in not every company is able to have researchers and designers separately. Others, you are everything in one. So it's very important to be able to split your kind of responsibilities between research and design equally, so that you know how much, you just give equal time to, not rushing it just to jump to the design. And then now we're getting to the build. Build is everything, I think, design related. So, when you've synthesized the research, what's next? It's really now creating these user stories, the user flows, and prioritizing features. Sometimes you might come out from the research with very many potential features, right? That could solve the same problem, in so many ways. Like, in other words, you have so many answers to this one question, but you have to be able to prioritize based on resources, and then also the requirements from the company as well as the users. So this is something, again, these are the exercises that you do with, if you're working with researchers, or if you are the researcher, this is something that you do together, so that you actually, you're getting validation also from the researcher that, yes, this is actually something that needs to be number 2 on the feature priority, because, the user group of A would, you're able to kind of inform these different priorities, and it's not just something that is coming out of the blue, because otherwise you can end up building a product that has so many different features, but then maybe the one that you thought was the least relevant is something that was actually the most relevant. If you actually go back to the research, you'd show that some of the nuances maybe of that one is the one that you should focus the most on. And again, this is also the step where you create simple wireframes and low fidelity designs to gather stakeholder and user feedback. So as you can see on the right, I'm sure many of you are familiar with wireframes. These are just simple, very simple, architectural layouts. It's mainly to get an understanding of the user flows, basically the user journey, and then how a user will interact with the product. But of course, you don't want to put so much effort and resources and time to making these very high fidelity, almost final looking designs. Then now you have all these you have so many iterations you have to do. You have to get rid of so many screens. So this kind of method called wireframing really helps with saving time and being able to also move fast with being just getting your ideas on paper. You're able to take these designs with your colleagues, to other stakeholders, and even to users, just to see what their initial reactions are. You come back quickly and you start changing things based on the feedback, and then that's when now you get to over time. There's so much that goes into this, but with that constant round of feedback and iterations, then now you're able to get the high fidelity designs and prototypes. And at this point now, this is where you kind of work with the developers to get this into code, so that it can actually be a working product. And sometimes you also want to do the user testing. Like for some of our projects, we've seen that it's helpful to do user testing even before it goes to code, so that you start seeing any like maybe pieces of feedback that would be beneficial to consider before code is actually being written, because that takes also a lot of resources. And if you can get feedback before code, and you can do that with prototypes, why not? So I think it's very important to take these steps play a huge part with being able to see to be able to have the final product be human-centric and one that is directly serving the users and the different personas that you have for the product. And finally, we have testing. So again, this is like very much part of the research category, but without testing, you're not really validating whether the designs are working or not, right? You have to be able to have a way of either validating or invalidating what you're doing. And ideally, you're already getting all this feedback in the process. It's not just waiting until the code has been done and then now you're getting this opportunity to test. When you're able to test throughout, you'll realize even at the end, a lot of the things you realize are actually being validated by the users, because you're able to put their needs at the center throughout the entire process. And that's the main reason that the user experience design process is very important, so that you're not getting to the end, building things, and the people using are like, this is not what I would, this is not even what I would consider to be using in this app or product. And then now you have a failed product because maybe another competitor maybe got the requirement right? So we want to be able to take the time for this process. So with testing, again, it can happen at any point during the process, so during the low fidelity designs, the wireframes, and even, of course, after the high fidelity prototypes. And also, user testing is a key step in staying focused on the user's needs and ensuring the products are relevant to them and the business. And then depending on the product, testing can take the form of moderated and moderated or unmoderated tests. That means sometimes you have this situation where you can actually just set up, maybe if you're on Figma, you set up a prototype and you are able to set up questions that people can answer, your participants can actually answer remotely without you or the researcher being present. So you tell them, how do you feel if it's a specific task, question A, question B, question C, and then now you watch the recordings afterwards to see how they actually would use this product. Whereas and then maybe like highlighting the things that they're doing a bit strangely that, oh, okay, I didn't think they would do this or this at this. So it helps you see how they're thinking without even the researcher being present. Whereas moderated tests, that's usually with the researcher present, and then now you want to probe a bit more to get more answers, maybe from what they're saying. So if they do something in a different way than you expected, maybe you could ask, what led you to do this in this way? And then now you hear their responses. There's also guerrilla testing, which is really the easiest and cheapest form of testing, where you just go and find people who you can. Again, I don't think family and friends are the best, but if you have people who you just finding 5 people you can reach out to who are in users of that specific product and just getting their responses. It's a very easy way of, it's also called hallway testing, which usually means like in the office, you just go and show them the prototype and get feedback very quickly. Interviews also kind of like moderated tests. So sometimes it may not be remote, but you want to have the qualitative and quantitative interviews. Qualitative, um, meaning it's more about the what they're saying and not about numerical statistics, whereas quantitative is more now about like numbers, how many people are doing this, and this. And there's so many other ways of testing, which I think maybe was reviewed last week with the UX research presentation. So I hope so the best tools for prototype testing, I've just seen Lynette asking the question, and please feel free to actually use the chat right now before the Q&A. So the tools that I use actually are Figma. In terms of prototyping, it's very robust, but when you need a bit more a bit more features, like sometimes you want to see the user actually typing, like using the keyboard to type specific things on the prototype. So there's apps like there's products like ProtoPie. I think I'll even type it here. So ProtoPie and Figma are the ones that we use, or that I use rather. So on moderated testing, there's one called user testing. So that's the one that there's actually very many ways of doing. Unmoderated tests can be very simple, where you even you have your prototype set up, and you send the questions to somebody. It doesn't even have to be through a tool, but it's something that you can tell them, hey, here's the link to the prototype. Here are the questions. And then you just tell them to record their screen with because essentially that's what the the tools that you use do. They record the screen and then they give you the questions. For unmoderated test, maybe question number 1 will show you like do this, and this. Once you do it, it takes, and then now you go to the next one. So the other one is called Maze also. That's a good one for unmoderated tests as well. But there's really a lot of tools, and there are so many upcoming as well. Sometimes I wish I was a researcher so that I could get more up to date with some of these tools. When you're in a big team where there's researchers and designers, sometimes you tend to focus on the design side, so I'm more of knowing a lot of these like design and the design and prototyping tools. And then now if you were to talk to a researcher, they'd be more up to date on more of the research tools, so those are kind of, but I'd be happy also to share more even after this presentation once I come across. And then in companies, this is a question from Claire. It's Adobe XD is also great. With Figma and Adobe, it's really a preference thing, and also depending on where you are working. The thing is that Figma has become very kind of the same way Sketch. I don't know if you guys remember Sketch, but Sketch was like the OG kind of design tool for everyone. And I think more and more Figma is kind of taking that global approach to being the tool for designers globally. So the problem with well, I don't want to say the problem. The benefit of using Figma and getting used to Figma is a lot of companies are adopting it as their tool of choice. So again, Figma and Adobe, the only difference is just the preference and where you work, maybe. And a lot of companies are going with Figma for many reasons. And then such as Microsoft, are you limited to use company software? Not at all. Actually, for us, for design and prototyping, Microsoft doesn't even have design and prototyping tools. So you go according to what your, for us, like the design team, what they're using. And that's Figma. And anyway, most people anywhere were using Figma. So it's not like it was a huge shift to or compromise to start using Figma. The main things of the company software that we use is the Teams, Outlook, not the productivity software, but not the design software. And I'm seeing, let me go. Lillian also has a question. So how often do you or your team hold research interviews? This happens a lot. Actually, it's something almost, I don't even know how to quantify it, but it happens very consistently. Like when you're on the scale of the people who do research at the end, interviews versus doing it at every stage of the UX process. Now for us, we lie at that stage of, we do it at like every process of the UX process. So you can see, like, I think this past, in a span of like 5 months, you can find that you've done 3 different studies. And our studies take form in different shapes. So sometimes you have these round tables where different customers come and you just hold like a round table session and answer their questions and things like that. Or it could actually be user testing sessions where we have like low fidelity designs and you want to get quick feedback. So it happens often, just to, I will just say it's very often. How complicated would you rate the process of sourcing interviewees? That one actually is a question I think was tackled by Ken, the UX researcher, last week. It's not very easy, especially because sometimes you want a very specific group of people, yet a very diverse group of people. So, and when you're using a specific tool, you'll realize sometimes that the participants are not really meeting your requirements or what you had in mind. People aren't signing up as much, so it can be a bit hard sometimes. But I think the best place is actually to refer to the research study as well. Do you recommend establishing a long-term paid scheme where consistent users regularly come in for interviews? That's actually the products that we use for testing. They are paid products, and you can actually, even you can go and sign up for them. These are usertesting.com. So in other words, you as a participant gets paid for your time to be a research participant, which usually that's the reason that one of the biggest problems and challenges is getting recruitment of participants. So paying is just the easiest and just a very sure way that you'll get participants. So usertesting.com. There's a new one even for African participants. I'm forgetting the name, but I'll remember and type it in the chat. But they're also trying to get, more diverse people. Sometimes in the other ones, you're finding that most people are from Europe, the US, Australia. So this one is to get a more diverse user base as well. And then my question is about navigating the time issue that we as designers often have, where the product owners and developers expect a high fidelity end product almost immediately. How do you ensure that you have covered the other 3 steps to avoid technical and design debt in the end? That's a very good question. And a lot of times I know that happens, especially in startup environments, in it's very rare to find companies that are like, oh yeah, take all the time you need in the exploration phase. Even in big companies, they're still going to expect you to turn over some high fidelity designs pretty soon. But one thing I've learned to do that has helped me in both, like in the roles that I've had, is actually just pushing back, because you have to make a case and a stance for why design needs that time. Maybe why the exploration time needs the time that it needs. Because you'll see that at the end of the day, that if you're not able to push back, and you kind of you deliver these designs that aren't well grounded, and I think that's happened to me before, it'll come and bite you in the back a bit later, where they start asking questions, and some questions you actually can't answer. And it's because you were either rushed or you felt rushed to kind of develop these high fidelity end products, right? These end results really quickly. So I think just pushing back, and maybe even making like a what is it called? A guide for the stakeholders to show you them. It also helps for you to know how long you would take. So you're not saying it might take X amount of time. I'm not sure. You should also be able to plan out. So maybe sharing your plan with the stakeholders, so that they see that eventually that high fidelity design will get there. It's going to take maybe 2 weeks, and it's going to take 3 weeks, not next week or this week, right? Because, and then are you back with the reason why? What kind of research are you doing? What's going to be needed in that? So pushing back, a lot of times people are willing to listen, because they also don't want you to get to that point where you do the designs and they're not relevant, or they're not backed by research. But I very much relate to that question. I think every designer does. This is a good one by Kenneth. So, how do you document your design process for the purpose of creating a case study? That's a very good. I think I even left it out of here by it's an oversight to leave documentation just in this process, and I think it should be at the between build and testing, or maybe after testing. Uh, um, it's a tricky one to answer, because a lot of times documentation, for a lot of people, it comes almost like an afterthought. And it shouldn't. Like, you should be able to, what we do is we have these ongoing, what's it called? We work a lot with with our content designers, our UX writers, in other words, and then we kind of are able to, let me get my thoughts together. We just want to be able to, we have these ongoing things where you write how each specific component, each specific feature is being used and should be used by other people. So if it's creating a component library, you have this ongoing document, and then at the end, it's kind of published to your, Figma file, or wherever you publish the documentation. And then for your own use, because you want to be able to create case studies as well, it's important, first of all, to note kind of the key highlights from each of these steps. So from the research in the beginning, note some of the most important insights, important quotes that you're getting, important just little tidbits that you're getting from what people are saying, that are informing the next your decisions, your product decisions. Then from the wireframing, you also want to kind of pick out some of the most important flows, to be able to that actually shows what is leading to the end result. So I think picking highlights from each of these steps is very important. From the prototyping, maybe you even want to include a link to the prototype. But the biggest thing, even with this, is like being able to the storytelling, for documentation. It's a huge skill for designers to have. Beyond just sharing your final product, you also want to be able to tell the story. From these insights of the research, what were you learning? What were you hearing? What were you, just talking through that process is very important. Otherwise, people are just going to be seeing visual things without understanding the depth behind all these different, and there's so much that's happening, and you don't want to miss that. So try and grab highlights and then also form the stories now around. Just think of yourself in each of those, even if you have to record voice notes, like think of yourself in that research phase, that initial understanding phase. What were you thinking? What were you thinking in the exploration phase, So I think, and in each of those specific phases, just record or write down at that exact moment so that when you're thinking of these case studies and portfolios, it's not this overwhelming essay you have to write. You're just recalling and picking out those things again to put in the portfolio. And then from Nas, so please share suggestions on how to present case studies in portfolios. Yes, so it's the same thing, kind of. It's the same. What I was saying is, like, as you're going through even if it's like an exercise maybe that you found online to put on your portfolio, just keep in mind these different steps and then try to record somehow, like in each step, try to document or take note of the highlights. Otherwise, you'll be recalling a lot of, you'll be trying to recall a lot of maybe what different users have said, some of the challenges you faced, maybe if it's in the understanding phase. And one of the challenges was that there's a very unclear business need. Sometimes that you might forget that by the end of the process. And if you haven't recorded that somehow, either voice or written, you might, in other words, just take note of each of these things as you move from one thing to the next, so that it helps you when you're coming to write a case study, you're just pulling all those things together into one case study. But the biggest thing with the case study, again, is the story you're telling around each of these steps. It's not just, I did research, quantitative and qualitative research. It's more of, what did you get from that phase? How did that impact your product and your design? What kind of insights were you drawing from what da said? Things like that. So it's not just telling people I identified the business case, I made user personas, then we did wireframes. That's not how you tell the stories. You have to tell the what exactly happened, the how, the what, the who. You're really painting this picture so that, yeah, people see what led to that solution. So, and then I had this Netflix UX exercise, which was just a sample. I would like to hear back from, just around the question that will be on the next slide. So just to see how, like, thinking of UX and these products that we use. So a study shows that too many options can lead to stress, anxiety, and discontent. What prevents Netflix users from spending less time on choosing and more time on enjoying the content? So the root of the issue is that people were not, Netflix users were not really, a lot of their time that they're spending on the app is more of choosing content, rather than watching, which is what it's meant to be for. So after running studies, some of the insights that came out were like 77% of the users had a hard time choosing something to watch. There was a lot of time wasted and a lot of irrelevant content on their feed. Users also don't consume the same content every time they log in. It differs between parameters such as time, day of the week, location, device, and etc. So you can see some of those nuances, how, the findings show. And then 75% wanted a more personalized interface. 71% wanted to see what their friends are watching, and 63% are trusting their friends' movie and content recommendations. So based on that, how can Netflix recommend something that the user wants to see before they even know they want to see it? So, based on these findings, how can I'd like to see some of the responses maybe on the chat, or if anyone has, I think maybe all the mics are muted, but just responses on the chat. What are some of of the things that you can think about that would make sense now from this. Of course, you haven't gotten time to to go through all the research again to, you're not going to be able to wireframe at this point. We only have 10 minutes, but what are some of the design decisions or product choices that you can make to satisfy some of these findings? Maybe like just on the chat, you can have a few minutes. I'm seeing segmentation. Maybe we can talk a bit about that. You can expound on that, Sherry. Oh, yeah, Susan is saying the new way of tagging the most watched movies at top 10 of the week. I think that's great, right? Because you're able to see what that would respond to 63% are trusting their friends' movie recommendations or to see what the friends are watching. So, a lot of times even I just go and see, okay, what's the top 10 in Kenya? And then I end up finding something that I really like. Well, what if you could take that even a step further and be able to connect with somehow being able to have contacts, specific contacts, because maybe your taste and the rest of Kenya's choice might not be the same. So is it possible to have like a connection with maybe WhatsApp or Instagram, just something where your actual friend groups can be the ones somehow suggesting and recommending. So you're seeing top 10 not in Kenya, but maybe top 10 in your friend group, right? So that because you're trusting these friends, it's not just the whole country. You're actually trusting that, these close friends know exactly what I'd be interested in also. Yeah, introduction of Netflix friends. Yeah, this is great. So Samson has just mentioned the same kind of what I was saying as well. Introduction of Netflix Friends, where one can connect with other Netflix users to get better recommendations with insights from friends. So you see these kinds of things. Yeah, Eve is saying provide what's trending. Exactly. Very cool ideas. Theodora, maybe a way for viewers to leave comments on movies. Yep, exactly. So you're seeing how all these recommendations are feeding into one or more of these data points. And this is something that Netflix should also try out. Like they could try some of these things out and they see how users are responding to them. If they really don't like them, then they'll just either remove them or try something else. And that's why it's like an iterative process. Chumo is saying directing the users into specific categories of their choosing. Very cool. Alvin is saying when they ask what you've watched before, if you've chosen anime, they'll suggest more animes or whatever algorithm they use. Yeah, exactly. So it's more like just tailoring a personalized interface. Yeah. And then Lillian asking for input during sign up or profile creation based on the genre preferences. Yeah, because I don't even know if I think it's when you sign up, it's almost like a blank canvas. And then eventually the algorithm is based on what you're watching, but there's no initial genre choosing, which is a good idea. But then Theodora or a Netflix community tab. Yeah, that's actually, I really like that. That would be awesome. So there's many, yeah, this is like really amazing responses. I think I'll take time to go through these afterwards, but I wish we could just have like people talking. It'd be really awesome, but it's okay. But you see all these different kind of thought process. This is exactly how the UX process helps you get to these final product decisions and choices at your, because at the end of the day, what you want is for your product to win. Now, when you have competition such as Amazon Prime, Hulu, even illegal content, I mean, like there's just so much you have to make your product stand out for in order to be the number one choice for people to continue paying for it all the time and to really enjoy it, right? To be the choice of product for whatever you're doing. So I think this one was just an example just to get the minds kind of moving and some interaction. But I think I'm seeing really cool suggestions, so I'll take some time to read them after. So that's actually it for my presentation. I know we've already gone through some of the questions, but if there's any last minute ones, because I can see we only have 5 minutes left. But yeah, I hope everyone is going through and seeing these really great responses as well. There's one even with the, with 77% having a hard time. Oh, sorry, this differing parameters such as time, day of week, location, and device. I was thinking maybe if you have different content according to different times of your days. Sometimes I wake up and I don't want to watch, like if it's animations in the morning, why don't they just suggest animations in the morning? Then in the middle of the day, maybe it's just something a bit more calming if you're working from home. And then at night, maybe it's something that, just to wind down. I should kind of be able to pick up on some of those nuances of how your context is. Then able to kind of suggest. I wouldn't have it that personalized where it's like they know in the morning, this is what I want to watch. For lunch, this is what I want to watch. Like at nighttime, things like that. Yeah. Let me see. There's some 2 questions here. So Samson, is UI and UX a subset of data analytics since they use that same use of data-driven decision making and the same processes? That's a good question. I wouldn't say it's like a subset of data analytics, but it applies a lot of the same principles. Data plays a huge part in the decision making of the user experience design process. So, because subset of it's more of in the design and the design industry uses a lot of, it's kind of just relying on each other, but it's not really a subset in a sense. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the answer for that. And then are there platforms you'd recommend like Behance for designers that allow UI and UX developers to share their work? Yeah, that's a very good question because I don't even think I've done a lot of like work sharing. Beyond just like Behance, it's a very hard one. But if I think of, let me see. I know what a lot of people do is having your portfolio website and then being able to share out on, Dribble is also great. It's just a bit less accessible than Behance because of there's some premium features and things like that, but it's also a great one. And again, a lot of the things that I have benefited from in the past is like these design Slack groups or just finding like Twitter, what are these Twitter kind of design leaders who they kind of get these groups together where you're able to like meet with other designers, share your work, see who's hiring and things like that. So in the past, that's kind of the platforms that I was more on because you're able to interact with these designers a bit more like personally rather than just seeing like the output or the visual output, which can sometimes be a bit intimidating. So sometimes it's nice kind of just looking at people's portfolios on a more low-key platform. Yeah. Yeah, so check out just like these African design Slack groups and social networking, groups that are out there. I think that'd be really awesome. And if there's no more questions, I think that is, I can see one more from Caroline. Is it necessary to have a design mentor, someone to put you through, and where can one get? I think it's very important because I had a design mentor and I think they played one of the biggest parts of my career as well. So they really either connected me to opportunities, they helped me. Actually, I had different mentors for different things. So it was like just understanding the design processes a bit more clearly. Others to challenge me with like different, what are these called? Yeah, to challenge me with different questions and design challenges that I can work on to grow my design skills and visual design skills as well. And where can one get them? It's a bit hard because I think in this time it's really more about reaching out to people on LinkedIn to kind of maybe blindly or having someone else connect you to them. And then just yeah, it's more of that thing of reaching out to people that you find kind of align with your background on LinkedIn and then reaching out to them. Or if you're in any meetup group, there's one called UX Kitchen. There's ADP list where you can find really great mentors. I've seen it. Andrew just mentioned ADP list. Yeah, exactly. So you can find really great mentors there. And yeah, there's just a number of opportunities. The Slack groups, I can't remember them off the top of my head because I have to admit that I haven't been very active on them like this year. So I have to remember, like I'll have to recall them and then maybe have, I don't know how I can share them back, but um, maybe even just checking like online any Slack groups. Like if you Google them, I think some of them will come up. And then you look at them for a very like African design Slack groups or social groups. Yeah. And I think for the last question, how did you settle on becoming a UI and UX designer? So it's really, I started out with software development, thinking that's the line I wanted to go in, but then I realized that UX design kind of combined a lot of my background, my passions, and the skills together in one career path. So actually, in that time of pivoting from, I actually studied biology, then graduated, and then switched now into tech, tried software development. Then I realized now, oh, design actually has so many things that I love in one career field. So it really depends on your passions, what you are interested in, what you're good at as well, and then that's what you kind of choose to give your energy to. So that's how I chose the UX design path. And yeah, I think thank you so much for your time. I think I'll just end it there because I can see we're 2 minutes over, but this was a really, really awesome session. Yeah, and thanks so much for everyone who contributed as well and joined the session. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samantha, for such a wonderful presentation. I guess, yeah, it was super good. Yeah, I guess they have learned something one didn't know about the user experience, the design process, and they'll go and apply what they have learned so far. Yep. Yeah, and
Thank you all so
thank
much.
you everyone for showing up, and I think that's until the end. Yeah, so for the recording, I'll be sharing it during the course of the week. The link to the meeting for the next session, which we'll be having on next Wednesday. Yeah, I'll share the details via email as well. Yeah, thank you so much, and I hope to see you on the next session. Yeah, hope you and happy learning.
And I'll share the things that I remember. I can share them to Humphrey. Maybe you can also share with the group, like the